What's up, guys? Mason the Brock Henderson here, and this is Legends of Tomorrow, Season 7, Episode 1, The Bullet Blondes. So I decided to jump back into the CWDC shows, mainly because I feel like it's about to be Christmas. I kind of want to keep things a little bit lighter, and these DC CW shows are pretty simple, except for Superman and Lois, which is a little bit more in depth and is something that I think is better written. I look at The Flash, I look at Legends of Tomorrow, and I think, there's not really a whole lot to talk about there. So as long as they don't dip their toes too far into the stupidity, it should be pretty simple reviews, pretty lighthearted, no real problems, nothing really too dark or depressing. Like I almost consider doing The Walking Dead, and I'm like, you know what? Not quite in the headspace for that right now. But yeah, first of all, diving into this 7th season, it's the final season of Legends of Tomorrow. I vaguely remember what happened in season 6. I feel like it's been a while since I watched this show, but thankfully they did give us a little bit of a reminder, showed us that apparently the Wave Rider's been destroyed, they're trapped in 1925, and for the most part, that's kind of it. I will say this first episode was very dragging, I felt. It was the same length as most episodes, 42 minutes. It felt longer. It felt like a lot of this was just sort of dragging along, like it was taking forever to get anywhere. And by the time they finally decided to be the Bullet Blondes, I don't even know how long was left in the episode, but I thought it was coming to the end of it. And then all of a sudden, it keeps going. And I don't know. I was confused. I'm like, wait, we're not done yet? We're still going? How much is left? And I think there was like still 15 minutes after that. It was just a very long-winded episode. It felt like not a whole lot of interesting stuff was happening either. They had this thing for the circus, and it felt like that's what they were going to do. And I was like, okay, here we go. And then they didn't even go through with that. So I don't know. It kind of felt pointless to spend that much time on it. Then they find this pocket dimension, and I'm guessing this is just a way to write Zari off for most of the season. She'll be hanging out there. I'm guessing. She just stayed there. So it kind of feels like, yeah, I don't want to be on the show for majority of it. Okay, well, we'll just write you off. We'll just have you spend time in this pocket dimension. Okay, that works. Yeah, that's kind of what it felt like to me. Outside of that, I really don't know where this season's going to go. Obviously, it's probably going to be focused on the mystery of who was in the other Wave Rider and destroyed theirs. I would think it would be another version of themselves, but maybe not. Maybe it's something else entirely. Because in my mind, there's something very Loki Season 2 about this, and it's funny that I watched Loki Season 2 just recently, and then I dive into this, and it feels like there's a lot of similarities. I don't know if the writers of Loki Season 2 looked at this show and took some plot points, but you've got their Wave Rider getting destroyed by another Wave Rider, which kind of feels like similar to how Loki pruned himself in Season 2. You've also got them visiting the guy who apparently started the Time Bureau in 1925. They're going to visit him in New York City, very much how Loki and Mobius went and visited Victor Timely in the timeline. There are definitely some similarities, and I don't know if that's what it's going to be, is that they are in the Wave Rider that destroyed it, and they had to destroy it to make sure that they made the choices that they did to get where they are. I can't think of anything else, honestly. But outside of that, just this episode in general, besides feeling long, it was kind of silly and not in a fun way. Like sometimes this show can be silly, but I enjoy it. I have a good time with it. I laugh, I chuckle, whatever. It's fun. It's a fun show that typically doesn't take itself too seriously. But this kind of got silly in another way. It got silly in that way that feels like too goofy for me. It feels kind of almost like it's for kids at some points, and it's not. This is written for young adults. I know CW is teens, young adult type of audience members, but this felt very childish at times, and I don't know, I feel like they could have done a little bit better with it. The whole thing with J. Edgar Hoover, I thought it was setting up for something different. I don't really know what they're doing with it now. I thought it was setting up for he was going to be kind of the constant thorn in their side all season until they get the Wave Rider back, and he was just going to be constantly trying to hunt them down, but now he's dead. And the way they handled his death I thought was really ridiculous, because first of all, you've got them leaving the scene of, I'm assuming they're maybe like 4th or 5th robbery. Apparently they've been doing this for a little bit, and they get this new name, the Bullet Blondes, at this robbery because they've got a woman who knows all about the gangs and stuff, which I will admit that was kind of funny because it is sort of true for that time how a lot of Americans were very excited to talk about these different gangs. You think about the popularity of Bonnie and Clyde and stuff at that time. So it's very much kind of the same line of thinking where this woman is so in tune with these gangs that she knows they're not who they say they are. So then they come up with the Bullet Blondes, and as they're driving away, all of a sudden J. Edgar Hoover's there. And granted, he might have had time to catch up to them and Clearly they're trying to show, oh, he's a really smart person, and so that's how he managed to catch up to him and how he managed to get in front of him. But then he calls them the Bullet Blondes, and that's where I do have to question a little bit the writing for that. Like, it would have made more sense if he called them by their original name and then they shouted out, actually, we're the Bullet Blondes now. How would he know? They just left the crime scene calling themselves the Bullet Blondes for the first time, and then suddenly he's calling them the Bullet Blondes? That's kind of stupid. And then as they're driving forward, he jumps up on top of the car after they crash through his little barricade, and then they fling him off. He survives that, and then he goes to shoot Nate, blocks the bullet off of his head into J. Edgar Hoover's head, and now he's dead. That's kind of stupid. That's kind of stupidly set up. You know, and I realize it's supposed to be a little ridiculous because that's the theme of this show, but there's some point where the ridiculousness gets so much that you just kind of have to go, what? What are you doing? Like, what are the writers smoking to get them to reach this point where, yes, we're going to have J. Edgar Hoover catch them, but then they're going to drive past him, but then he's going to be on top of the car, but then they're going to fling him off, and then he's going to shoot Nate, but then Nate's going to block the bullet back into his head, and that's how they're going to kill him. You can have it be goofy and still make sense. This makes no sense. Honestly, I came up with this probably in about 5 minutes of trying to think of a better way. If they wanted to kill off J. Edgar Hoover, a better way to do it would be they're driving. Maybe you've got Gary driving because he tends to panic a lot. So it would make sense in this frame of mind. But he's driving at J. Edgar Hoover, and Hoover's shooting at them. His little helper is shooting as well. It's like you're driving right at him, and Gary's freaking out. He's like, guys, he's not moving. And he's just still shooting. And they're like, all right, stop the car, don't hit him. And so he goes to stop, he tries to hit the brakes, but it turns out one of the bullets nicked the brake line, and so the brakes aren't working. And then Gary, instead of just swerving out of the way, freaks out and then drives straight through the barricade, straight through J. Edgar Hoover, and kills him that way. That would make more sense. It would be in line of Gary's character, and it wouldn't be so goofy that it just sort of takes you out of the show. The way they did it, it took me out of it. I was just sitting there shaking my head going, this is so dumb. Like, this is not fun or funny. This is just stupid. I was a little disappointed with that. I really don't know what they're planning to do now that J. Edgar Hoover's dead. Obviously, Nate already pretended to be him at one point, so I don't know if they're going to go back to doing that again. But it just feels directionless at the moment. You've got Gideon apparently came to life because of Astra's spell. I don't really know how that works, but sure. It just feels like I have no idea what they're going to do with this. And this is the final season, so I'd kind of like it to be something pretty epic and pretty fun and something that feels like this is what this show has been building to. And I just don't see where they're going to go from here and how they could possibly make it interesting from here. Because I feel like being stuck in 1925 is not fun with it when the show is so normally jumping all around time and visiting these different time periods, these different places in these different time periods. I feel like that's a lot of the fun of the show, and now we're kind of stuck here in 1925. And I don't know how long we're going to be stuck here, but the longer we are, the less fun it's going to get for me because, I mean, it's not fun to keep seeing the same time period over and over and over again. So yeah, those are all my thoughts on this first episode. Hopefully the second one kind of picks up the pace a little bit and gives me a clear direction of where we're going to go next. But with that being said, let's get on to it. I'll see you there in just a sec. And now episode 2, The Need for Speed. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not really into this season, and part of it is now knowing that obviously we're stuck here for a little bit, and like I said, I feel like that is just not as fun because a lot of the fun of the show is time travel, and we're just not doing it for this final season, at least for the first part. I don't know if it's gonna last through the whole season or just the first half of the season, but yeah, I mean, it's not exciting knowing that we're just stuck in 1925. And not just that, we're also stuck in 1925 with a bunch of people telling us, hey, America was awful in 1925. Okay. Like, it feels so preachy to me, the amount of times they keep going back to, oh yeah, Hoover was a nice guy, but doesn't mean he was a good guy. Oh yeah, people look like us, which I get that for Bayrod. I don't really get that for Gary. Don't really understand that. But yeah, it's constant. And it's one of those where it feels like the people writing this show hate America and hate, we were founded on terrible principles and we're a racist society. And it's such a stupid mindset to have because it makes you feel like the people that think that way are basically just living in the past. They're just living at a time where, yeah, things were bad, but we've grown past that. We have. Whether people think so or not, we've grown past that. And yet people still want to complain about how things used to be. That doesn't make any sense. The fact that this was 100 years ago, and look how far we've come since then, that should be the message, but instead it's, oh, look at the stuff that was happening back then. Oh, yeah, if you were white and a man, then yeah, it was great for you. That's so stupid. It's such a stupid mindset to take, and the fact that it feels like that's going to be a lot of... There were a couple of lines here and there in the first episode, but it wasn't that much. In this one, it was just constant. The amount of times that Bayrod and Gary were basically just sitting there looking at Nate going, yeah, you're enjoying yourself. Oh, yeah, because you're white and you're a man. Oh, yeah, good for you. It felt like it was nonstop. So I'm just not going to enjoy that. If that's going to continue to be the message for this season, is just focusing in on how bad things were in 1925, then I'm not going to enjoy that. That's not fun. It's the opposite of fun. It's just reminding everybody, hey, things used to be bad back in the day. Cool, we're not back in the day anymore, are we? We're living in modern day times and things are better now. Some people may disagree with that. Things are better. Whether you like it or not, they're better than they were in 1925. Maybe it's not perfect. I don't know if we'll ever get to that point because there are always going to be idiots out there. But I think we've reached a point where majority of people you ask, they don't care what you look like. They don't care where you came from. We all kind of accept each other for the most part, outside of political stuff, but that's just a whole different ballgame we're not going to get into. But yeah, so that's very frustrating. The whole thing with Hoover, and apparently now there's a robot version of him. I thought when the other Hoover showed up, there was a part of me that's like, okay, so maybe he wasn't actually human, and maybe that's why he was able to jump up on top of a moving car and survive basically getting shot off the top of a car at high speed. I don't know. I thought they were going to do something interesting with it, and it turns out he's just a robot replacement. Somehow I don't get that. It feels very random. I really don't have any theories at this point. Like, I thought it was going to be they blew their own Wave Rider up because this is how they wanted it to be. Now I don't know. Now apparently they're robot replacements coming into the timeline. Now it sort of feels like maybe Gideon or some other version of AI took over the Time Bureau, and essentially it's trying to keep the timeline intact using robots. And basically just, yeah, humans are doing such a bad job of keeping the timeline intact, so we're just going to do this automatically. So automated restructuring of the timeline. If somebody dies, replace them that wasn't supposed to, replace them with a robot. AI takes over the Wave Rider, destroys the Legends Wave Rider so they can't do anything else to hurt the timeline. That's kind of where the current story feels like it's going. If it's that straightforward, that's pretty boring. But I don't know. Again, my mindset was they blew up their own Wave Rider for a purpose. Maybe to go talk to the guy that started the Time Bureau. But now with Ava saying if they go see him, then they'll die. I don't know what that means. It feels very odd and nonsensical, but not in a good way. So I don't know. I don't know what they're planning to do, but I guess we'll just have to wait and see if they manage to actually make it interesting or if it turns out to be kind of stupid. Outside of that, we also spend some time with Astra and Spooner and Gideon, and I don't get it. Like, Gideon's acting like a little kid, but it turns out that she just can't find a way to communicate. And then Spooner apparently has actual abilities outside of her communication with aliens. Apparently it's just abilities that she has because she was feeling down about herself. And so the writer's like, oh, we got to give Spooner some magical abilities so that way she has purpose too. Because, yeah, your magical abilities give you purpose, not who you are as a person, right? That's a great message. So if you don't have magical abilities, guess what? You suck. You have no purpose in life. Yeah, apparently her reading Gideon's mind is enough for Gideon to suddenly be able to speak. I don't get that. I don't really understand how that works, but sure, whatever. What are you going to do with it? That's what I don't know. But overall, it feels like an episode that's just sort of plodding along. We get a couple of story progression moments, but for the most part, it feels like it's dragging its feet. It feels like it's putting us in this situation to basically talk about, oh, guys, America, it's not good. America's not a good place. See, look how it was back in the 1920s. That wasn't that long ago, and look how bad it is for all these people. Doesn't that just suck? Don't you feel bad for them? And that's the only reason it feels like it's set in this time period, is just to talk about that. I don't know. Is that interesting? Is that an interesting story? For me, not really. And I'm more interested to see what's going on with this other Wave Rider, with this robot Hoover. Why did that happen? And honestly, even with that, it feels like it's a simple story. I don't know if they're going to go the simplistic method that I was talking about, but it kind of feels like that's what they're leaning toward. I think that's about it for this episode, so we'll see what happens next. But on to the final of these three. I'll see you there. And finally, episode 3. You got to be kidding if you think I'm going to try to read that title, because that's basically Wave Rider Error 100 something. I don't know. Better episode overall. Unfortunately, it also gives me information which now I think I know what's happened with that alternate Wave Rider showing up, and it's not great, and I'll get to that in a minute. But first, I will talk about the main chunk of the episode, which is Gideon sort of finding out what humanity is and how through your struggles you get better, you evolve, you improve, even through the hard times, even through the rough times. And I mean, it's a story that's definitely been done before, but I like it. It's always a good story to have, and especially to delve into a lot of the stuff that's happened in the past for the show. A lot of the tougher times that the Legends experienced and Gideon herself experienced too. I like that. And I think it also gives a little bit of an explanation as to why Gideon has always seemed a little bit more than just an AI. It's because what Rip Hunter programmed into her from the very beginning. I don't know if I needed that explanation or not, but it works. I feel like it really does suit how she has acted from season 1. And honestly, it was really cool to see a lot of these actors come back and reprise their roles. In looking it up, this actually is the 100th episode. It is fitting that this is the 100th episode where we get to relive a lot of these past seasons. I guess they couldn't get some of them back because, like, Mick Rory, we just saw him sleeping on the ground, and I'm assuming that's because the actor couldn't come back, so he couldn't show his face. But I did wonder, were they just showing scenes that we've seen before and these actors didn't come back? But no, they did bring them all back clearly. And it does make me wonder how many of these scenes didn't happen originally and how many of them did, and then they just sort of added on to them. Most of them seemed unfamiliar to me, but obviously I've not watched this show, and a lot of the first seasons I've not watched for years now. So there's a good chance I've just forgotten if these scenes did happen. But who knows? Maybe there's a chance that some of these scenes did happen, and then maybe there were slight changes to them. Maybe they kept them mostly the same, but just brought these actors back to redo the scenes. It's an interesting quandary that I have. But yeah, I think it is interesting to see Gideon go through this quest, and I like the conclusion she came to as well at the end, where this logic virus that was trying to basically reset her and bring her back to this idea of humanity is wrong, she sees that as a part of herself too. And it is. Like, she is an AI that was programmed to understand humanity more, and so that is a part of her. I really did see this virus as a logic virus because a lot of humanity is illogical. So because it was constantly trying to get her to reject humanity, that's what I assume it was. It was just constantly trying to get her to think logically and to push away this side of her that does experience pain, that does experience all these other emotions that typically are not seen as good when you think about, well, what is best for you? Well, most people would say, well, I just want to be happy. But that's a simple way of looking at it, because if you're constantly happy, you don't really know what happiness is. You have to experience pain, you have to experience sadness to truly understand what it means to be happy. Because if you don't ever experience that, then how do you know that you're happy? It's a very complex concept to think of. And I think it works that this logical side of her is basically trying to bring that side back to make things a lot more simple and a lot less complex for her. So overall, I really liked her journey. I liked, again, going back through some of these, getting to see these actors return as well. It was a nice way to spend the 100th episode, just reliving the good times. But outside of that, we do have, in my opinion, I think the answer to what happened with the Wave Rider getting blown up. It seems like Bishop is back, and he, for some reason, got a hold of Gideon, don't know how, managed to program her and copy her onto this little hard drive thing that he has. Apparently somehow remembers everything that happened before, and then after reprogramming Gideon, he now has access to her and resets her so that the humanity programming is basically gone. And the first thing she says is what makes me think that he's responsible for what happened with the Wave Rider, where she asks him if he wants to eliminate anachronisms, and he says, I know the biggest one to get rid of, first of all, a little band of misfits or something. So obviously, in my mind, that is what happened. With these robots that are being put in to the timeline, it makes sense that Bishop would be the one behind it. He's using this Gideon program to essentially find these anachronisms so he can replace them with probably robots, if that's what I had to guess. And obviously the Wave Rider being blown up would make sense if he was the one that did it to get revenge on the Legends. My problem with it is it means we have another season with Bishop, and he was fine. I don't remember disliking him too much. I had some funny moments, if I remember right. I might have to go back and watch my reviews of the last season to see what my thoughts on him were, but I feel like I remember enjoying it okay. I don't remember really loving his performance and his character, but I don't remember hating it either, so we'll see how they handle him, but it is a little disappointing that we're just sort of going back to, okay, well, it's him again. He's the bad guy again, and it's just him trying to get revenge on them again. I don't know. It feels a little too easy, a little too simple, and kind of repetitive in a way. So that's just my feeling on it. Again, if they do something interesting with it, then I'll have a good time. But definitely for right now, finding out that he seemingly is going to be the main bad guy again for this final season, it is disappointing. It is disappointing that we couldn't get, I don't know, some ultimate bad guy for them to take on, or something really either meta or really in-depth. I mean, they've taken on a lot of big bads. You think about, they took on the Fates, they took on Damien Dark, they took on Malice, who, what was he supposed to be again? Wasn't he like a demon or something? I mean, they've taken on a lot of really powerful foes. So it's like trying to think about how could you top that power-wise. I don't know if there's a lot you can do, but there is something interesting to think about. What if it was a version of themselves? Since it's a Wave Rider that took out theirs, what if another version of themselves is out there? A different timeline, somehow it got, after the whole multiverse thing collapsed, after the crisis, maybe there's another version of them that showed up on the timeline, and now they're out there trying to cause trouble. I don't know. Something interesting, I guess. This just feels like more of the same. Like, yes, it's a different type of danger that Bishop's going to bring this season, and knowing that he has access to Gideon and has access to the timeline and stuff like that, and he's managing these anachronisms, and seemingly he's replacing any issues. Like if somebody dies when not supposed to, he's replacing them with robots, presumably. It's different than last season for his plan, but it's still him. And because of that, I'm still sitting here going, okay, I mean, that's just not really that interesting to me to have the same guy be the main antagonist for this season. However, with that being said, those are my thoughts on these 3 episodes. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below. What were your thoughts on these 3? Let me know. We can talk about and discuss all that good stuff. Leave a like and subscribe for future Legends of Tomorrow reviews. Also check out the channel. We have a lot of TV show reviews as well as a couple Let's Plays on there. Check those out if you have time. But until next time, hope you guys have a great day. I'll talk to y'all later. Peace out.